and gentlemen, very good evening to you all and welcome to this event at the invitation of Garia. My name is Jerry Ajololo, and on behalf of the CEO and the entire Secretariat, I'd like to say a very good evening to you and to welcome you to this event. 305 days ago, we began this journey called 2023 with hope and great expectation. It's been a journey of faith and determination amidst global and local headwinds. But ours has been head above water. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are in good structure and greatly solvent. I guess God deserves a resounding round of applause for his faithfulness unto us. My name is Jerry Edemajololo, and on behalf of our CEO and the entire Secretariat, allow me to say a very good evening to you, our chairman for today, the Professor Emeritus Albert Fiajo, the Second Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Madam Elsie Ado-Awaji, the President of Garia, Mr. Felix Ado, and the Governing Council members here in present, our keynote speaker who will be joining us shortly, honorary members, sponsors for today, PwC and the Bank of Ghana, heads of professional associations here in present, distinguished guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the launch of the maiden edition of the Corporate Restructuring and Insolvency Journal, which I believe is well positioned to showcase how we turn crises into opportunity and growth. It's a bold innovation that comes prior to our annual Garia Week, and I believe this bold innovation also deserves celebration. Tonight is one of those evenings we get to underscore the essence of what we do at Garia. For 16 years, ours has been bold steps to create awareness on insolvency and restructuring. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to invite, to officially welcome us, a man who served us and continues to serve with distinction as the President of Garia. Would you please make welcome the one, the only, Mr. Felix Ado.
Thank you, Jerry. Good evening, all. This is indeed a momentous occasion for us. Garia started 2006 in the offices of PwC. 2023, we've come a long way, as they say. We have charted some interesting aspects of the Ghanaian business landscape. And just your presence this evening here with us shows that you do respect and you do value what Garia has been doing towards improving our Ghanaian economic landscape. Now, this evening we have among us intellectuals. I guess all of us are intellectuals. But more specifically, we have lawyers, we have members of the judiciary, we have bankers, we have accountants, and we have business people. Now, we all have one thing in common, and that is making sure that distressed companies become viable and they contribute their share to our national economic resuscitation. In recent days, we've been hearing about restructuring. But the restructuring we've been hearing about is more on the national level. What Garia focuses on is restructuring at the company level. So it's not so much restructuring for partnerships, restructuring for SMEs, or restructuring for municipals and governmental bodies. But interestingly, the concepts are the same. It's just that it's a different regulatory framework and a different playing field for those various bodies. Okay. You've heard about haircuts in recent days. When we do restructuring for companies, we do that too. You've heard about moratoriums. You heard about extension of the payback period. Those are all concepts in restructuring for companies. And basically, the premise is that companies, just like all of us, have good times and bad times. We go through seasonal cycles. previously, before Garia came into being, when a company needed help, was distressed, had cash flow challenges, invariably, you either go the liquidation route, or as we do in Ghana, you kind of drift. You keep going, going, going. You are not contributing anything, but you are occupying space. And that itself is a waste of resources. Okay. Now, with Garia, we've managed to secure the CIRJ. And we didn't do it just by ourselves. We did it with the collaboration of all of you, especially with the current administration, because the CIRJ draft bill was ready in 2008, 2009. It took over a decade through successive governments to be able to put it on the table and have it signed. And that happened in 2020. Now we have another draft bill. This is the bill which will convert Garia into a chartered institute of restructuring and insolvency, CIRJ. And the Deputy Attorney General is giving me a nod. The Attorney General's office finished with the bill, and I believe it was approved by Cabinet somewhere in June, July, and was forwarded to Parliament. Now, Parliament has been on recess, and it's had, I guess, slightly more urgent things on the agenda. So we're praying and hoping that before we get into the thick of the political season, they will attend to that. And I'm hopeful, Madam Deputy AG, that your office will make sure that that happens. On behalf of Garia, on behalf of the Governing Council, let me welcome you all to this evening's event, which is the launch of our maiden journal. And interestingly, the journal started as a conversation, the concept of the journal, between the deputy governor of the bank, and she is a powerhouse of thought leadership, if I may add. Since 20, 30 years ago, she's been writing on various thought leadership issues in the same area, in restructuring banks, in distressed companies, and corporate governance. So I believe about a couple years ago, when we bumped into each other in one of these events, and she intimated that, for an organization to be truly recognized as a thought leadership organization, and also to be a professional association, in addition to having a body of knowledge, having a code of ethics, having members registered and membership committees and all those things, and paying dues. We shouldn't forget that. We should have a journal too. Yes, needless to say, the idea was well thought and it was very appropriate. It's taking us a couple years to get here. And even on the journal you'll be seeing today, you'll see that it's dated June. Now, of course, today is November 1st, right? It's been a few months since June. But the journal was ready thereabouts in June. And it's only today we are getting to launch it. And for a good cause. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, welcome again to the launching of our maiden journal. Thank you. Welcome.
I like listening to the president because he sounds like the Apostle Paul. When he's just about to end, he says, finally, brethren, and he writes 3 chapters. In moving on, we would like to acknowledge our 2 sponsors for today. I'm talking about the Bank of Ghana and PwC. How about a round of applause for them? It's my pleasure to invite our chairperson for today, who is also a member of the Governing Council and a co-chair of the Education, Training and Research and Publications Committee. He will provide a broad overview of the journal's mission, scope, and significance of the publication. With joy in your hearts, make welcome, ladies and gentlemen, yours and mine, Professor Emeritus Albert Fiajo.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am retired. I take things very easily. The Venerable Second Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Mrs. Elsie Avaji Ado, and her team of colleagues from the Bank of Ghana, Justice Hafiz Sata, Amali Boba, field judge representing the Chief Justice of Ghana, the Honorable Deputy Attorney General Dina Asonaba Dapa, my tardy brother Philip Ebo Bonzi Simpson, now Vice Chancellor, our indefatigable President of Garia, the one and only Mr. Felix Ado, who never stops working. So I describe him as Felix Ado of Ghana and abroad. Council members of Garia, Dr. Kenneth Garte and his intrepid group of editors on the editorial board, all invited guests, citizens not spectators, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you first and foremost fraternal greetings and at the same time apologies from my colleague and friend, Professor Justice Samuel Kofi Dateba, who is out of the jurisdiction and so is unable to join us this evening. I am standing in default of him because if he were here, he should be chairing this function as the chair of our committee that worked on this journal. I have never been a judge, nor do I aspire to be one, not least in my twilight years. Remember what the Holy Book says? Judge not, that ye be not judged. But there's one aspect of judgeship, with all apologies to Madam Justice, there's one aspect of judgeship that I relish with glee. Is the power of contempt. And precisely, I love it on an occasion such as this. That is when the opportunity is presented to me to preside over a captive audience, and I can exercise the power of contempt over all of you. But have no fear. Tonight is not for discipline. It is rather for loud celebration of great achievement and sterling accomplishment. Not long ago, we learned from our airwaves that as a nation, when dealing with harsh matters of insolvency, poverty, and impecuniosity, the salving phrase is, Sika mpedede. Well, contrary to that piece of advice, though we are in the realm of insolvency, hardship, and rescue this evening, by the authority vested in me as the presiding chair, I authorize the making of loud noise and joyful praise this evening for this occasion. So if you do agree with me, rather than stay serious and listen, please make a loud noise and joyful noise and hit the roof. Now, today is quite a landmark for Garia's Education, Training, Research, and Publications Committee. The launch of a journal to serve as a forum for the dissemination of knowledge and insights on corporate restructuring Restructuring and Insolvency has been an early objective of this committee, as Mr. Ado has just told us. In fulfillment today, is that satisfying? I'm therefore pleased to have been invited to give these introductory remarks. Garia's mission is to promote business rescue practice through education, research, and advocacy. Included in Garia's objectives is the promotion of thought leadership in connection with business turnarounds and insolvencies, and the facilitation of mutual exchange of opinions and information by practitioners and scholars who are engaged in research and practice in this field. It is in this broader context that this committee of Garia thought it wise to establish the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Journal. In the process of establishing the journal, the committee has benefited from the enthusiastic support of several Garia members who have volunteered to assist in the work of the committee. The committee is grateful to all of them and also to members of the editorial board for agreeing to be members of the board and to exercise broad oversight over the editorial policy of the journal. Mrs. Elsie Avagiado agreed readily and willingly to be the editor-in-chief. We are in her debt for accepting this role. Special thanks also go to Kenneth Gatti for accepting to be the editor of the journal. And finally, let me thank the President, the Chief Executive, and other members of Garia's management for their support in realizing this objective. With the enactment of the Companies Act in 2019, the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act in 2020, the progress made towards the promulgation of subsidiary legislation under these two statutes and the formulation of legislation placing Garia on a statutory basis, it is clear that Garia's advocacy of reform in the corporate legal framework in Ghana is bearing fruit. So the inauguration today of a maiden edition of the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Journal is yet another step in improving the framework for doing business in Ghana. Ghana now has many licensed insolvency practitioners, and it is hoped that this new journal will provide a forum for professional interaction for the practitioners to hone their skills in the interest of the business community. The emergence of the journal is probably a sign that insolvency and corporate restructuring practice is here to stay. So long may it survive. With this flowery acceptance of my chairmanship for this evening's function, may I suggest that the proceedings should now begin. Thank you very much.
In moving on, we would like to now reflect on our theme for this year's Garia Week. As we ponder on leveraging, restructuring, and business rescue for corporate renewal, turning crises into opportunity and growth, we're joined by a man who is all of these and more. Tonight, it has pleased God that we have in our midst a member of Garia who was part of the committee of experts who drafted the new Companies Act and the Corporate Insolvency Act, a regular contributor on the thought leadership activities of Garia as this, a product of the University of Ghana and the Ghana Law School. He's also an alumnus of the University of Saskatchewan, where he obtained his Doctor of Judicial Sciences, and the University of Toronto, also in 1990. He also possesses a graduate diploma in education from the University of Cape Coast, and ladies and gentlemen, he's practiced company law and secretaryship for many years and has several publications in company law, including the standard textbook for the subject company law in Ghana, which is in its 3rd edition. He served in many progressively responsible roles, amongst which are former Director of Legal Services and Investigations at the Commission of Human Rights and Administrative Justice, former Dean of Business at the University of Cape Coast, the founding Dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of Cape Coast, the immediate past Rector of the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration, and now that he's in the twilight of his career, is devoting the rest of his life to ministry, and hence, now the first Vice Chancellor of the Methodist University, his home church. It's with joy in my heart that I give to you Professor Philip Ebo Bonzi Simpson.
Thank you very much, Mr. MC. And just as the twilight has been put on me, I can indicate that I'm now warming up. Permit me, Mr. Chairman, to acknowledge those present. The Chairman, the leadership representing Chief Justice, the Honorable Deputy Attorney General representing the Attorney General, the Chair and members of the Governing Board of Garia, the Editor-in-Chief, editor, and members of the editorial board of the journal, distinguished ladies and gentlemen present, good evening. It is my singular honor to have been invited to make remarks as a keynote speaker. The theme itself is very appropriate, and I will speak particularly to what I will call the Trinity is complete. I'll speak to this in a little moment. Mr. Chairman, and I'd refer to you as a chairman with a swag. When you combine growing up in Takoradi with the Seaman Gully, plus Achimota, Brofu, plus Caribbean cruise, you have the chairman with a swag. Mr. Chairman, permit me to particularly single out one other person for mention before I address the theme. And he lives the motto of his alma mater, very cool and calm and collected, Bleo, where he has demonstrated that actions speak louder than words. And indeed, in respect of the three themes that I plan to speak about this evening, Garia, Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act, and this journal, he has played a very important role. I am speaking of no other person but Dr. Felix Addo. We acknowledge your contributions. Corporate insolvency and restructuring is absolutely necessary. A corporate body is an artificial entity, but it is an entity. And any entity can go through periods of ill health. And as an entity goes through a period of ill health, what do we do with it? Do we see that it recovers on its own? Do we see that it perishes on its own? Or do we put in place positive interventions and measures to endeavor, hopefully successfully, to have it nest back to good health? The legal regime in this country over the period has had different positions with respect to this matter. Speaking first and foremost about the Companies Act, it attempted somewhat, as was discovered, insufficiently to address it. Over the period between the Companies Code, then redesignated Companies Act, and the Replacement Act, the Bodies Corporate Official Liquidations Act, in the course of time, the Insolvency Act, more recently, the Companies Act of 2019, then the Corporate Insolvency Act and Restructuring Act of 2020, we have seen a progression to attempt to answer the same question. The thinking, and for good reason, is that if a natural human being should be nursed to good health, so too a juristic person should be nursed to good health. We know that sometimes human beings, despite the best efforts of hospitals and medical practitioners, may not make it. And so too we know that perhaps despite the best efforts, the corporate body may still not make it. But there is always a place for a good hospital and clinic, good doctors, nurses and pharmacists, biomedical scientists and the like. So too there is a place for a good regime that takes care of corporate bodies in crisis. The Act of 2020 has been a major step. Garia in 2006 took the first step to try and tackle this problem, and its first significant output has been the Act. The contributors to the Act are numerous, and the Office of the Attorney General has over the period been very supportive, but that is one step. But this is not the end of it. The trio or the Trinity begins with Garia. It continues with the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act. And today we come to the third element in the Trinity, which is the journal. It is not enough to have good hospitals and doctors. Hospitals are not only about treatment. A good medical facility should have in place provisions for preventive care and public education. How do we prevent preventable diseases? Similarly, as a country and as a jurisdiction, what measures do we put in place to ensure that the business environment is appropriate and that corporate practices are sound so as to minimize, if not altogether, eliminate the conditions that will even bring about distress to corporate bodies? That is important to do. And one way of attempting to address that is through an outlet where publications will be made and laypersons and business practitioners, solicitors, and the like can equip themselves as to sound practices. Beyond that, there is a need to appreciate what is going on in the world around us, and outlets for the publication of current trends and comparative studies are important. Thankfully, this evening we will be witnessing the launch of the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Journal. With such an outlet, we will have the capacity building component expressed to complement the legal regime, to build the capacity of practitioners. One thing that the 2019 Companies Act did was to include provisions for qualified insolvency practitioners. Who are they? What are they to do? How are they to be regulated and controlled, and their capacities built? All of these are well taken care of. It is therefore my humble suggestion that as we have witnessed the completion of the Trinity, Garia having been established and done its work, the piece of legislation to specifically address corporate insolvency and restructuring, building on what the earlier regimes have done, including their limitations. We have always known in this jurisdiction provisions about variations of class rights. They addressed part of the problems. We've known about arrangements that dealt with schemes of arrangement. We have known about arrangements where there's the appointment of receivers and managers. Under all these regimes, there were attempts, but severely limited, to address the situation of corporate rescue. We now have one which directly deals with corporate rescue in a way to turn it around to good health. The journal has 10 very good articles, and we would learn about the Ghana regime. We would learn about what has pertained in Canada, in Nigeria, and in South Africa. This is only the maiden edition. Hopefully, with the passage of time, every year, perhaps one, in due course, twice a year, perhaps once every 2 months, in due course, perhaps once a month, it should be the Bible for corporate insolvency and restructuring practitioners. It's my pleasure and my privilege to have been considered to share these thoughts. Having had the privilege of looking the journal through, I can commend it to all of us. And I believe taking a scan through the room to see who is present, everybody will profit from it, would and should recommend it to their corporate bodies and to their associates. And I hope in participating in this evening's event, we would see why corporate rescue is relevant. The Trinity is indeed complete. Good evening.
Talking about the Trinity, we are also honored to have the second person in the Trinity at the Bank of Ghana. The third person, I beg your pardon. We're joined by the second Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana, who is here in her capacity today to make a few remarks on the content and profile of the contributors and officially declare this maiden journal duly launched. Make welcome Madame Elsie Ado Awaji.
Since I'm part of the Trinity, then I bring you greetings from the Father, the Son, and I will call myself the Holy Spirit. Professor Chairman, Her Ladyship Hafisata Amaliboba, Representative, Court of Appeal Justice and representative of the Honorable Chief Justice, Honorable Deputy Attorney General, honorary members of Garia, members of Garia's Governing Council, management and staff of Garia, colleagues from the Bank of Ghana. We're here in their numbers, and it's good to see so many faces, as well as industry champions, banking sector professionals, all sorts of professionals, some who have come all the way from abroad, members of the press, invited guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. A very good evening to all of you. What a privilege it is to witness this milestone, the official launch of the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Journal of Ghana, I must add. This has been a project since 2020, and Felix talked about a couple of years ago. I like to put things in a bit of a perspective, in context. This actually started as a project from the pandemic year, 2020. And just when the CIRJ, the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act, had been passed, after several decades of work on it, following the passage of the new Companies Act. And then also the fact that for the first time under the Act, Garia, that had started as an association, which I had been privileged to be a founding member of, had been given some underpinnings under the Act to be the association and the body, the professional body for insolvency practitioners. And I felt that the next step would be for Garia to start a mouthpiece for intellectual discourse, for intellectual workmanship in terms of helping to develop our jurisprudence and our practice in this area. And so I mooted the idea, and Felix was very kind and gracious to have received it well, and came back to say that the Governing Council of Garia had actually accepted it. And the Governing Council is made up of Professor Dateba, Professor Fiajo, and many great minds, and that was quite encouraging. And here we are today, by the grace of God. So I highly commend the Governing Council of Garia for seeing the vision and running with it. The editorial committee, headed by Dr. Gate and many others who've been part of it. The staff of Garia, who have worked very tirelessly. Various contributing authors for this maiden edition. And all those whose hard work and perseverance have led to the production of Ghana's first ever Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Journal, and made tonight's launch possible. Ladies and gentlemen, the launch of this journal is nothing short of a miracle, given the challenges it has faced in its conception as well as its birthing. But we're here tonight, and so all is well that ends well. Some of the stories have been very interesting in terms of how far this has come. But through it all, the commitment of Garia and a group of individuals who have worked tirelessly to make this possible has never waned, and they deserve our utmost respect tonight. The journal, which is the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Journal, is designed to be the mouthpiece of Ghana's relatively young but fast-evolving insolvency and restructuring industry. It provides professionals in this space a place to provide thought leadership on various issues pertaining to or affecting the practice of corporate insolvency and restructuring. And it is my personal hope that this journal would also lead the public discourse, would shape the public discourse when it comes to matters of corporate failures and such, because sometimes the reporting around it and the discourse around it hasn't been very charitable. And hopefully this journal would help to shape a new culture that is more supportive of business rescues and restructuring and insolvency practice going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the journal, I like to say, joins the ranks of insolvency journals around the world. So it's a first in Ghana, but you'll find that there are insolvency journals all around the world. Examples include the European Insolvency and Restructuring Journal, the International Insolvency Journal, which is published by Insol, the National Insolvency Review, that is published in Canada, the American Bankruptcy Law Journal, and then so on and so forth, and then the Australian Insolvency Journal. So these are but a few of such journals that exist already around the world. It bears repeating, and I have to emphasize this, that this journal is not a law journal. By design, it is meant to be a multidisciplinary journal that educates and stimulates robust and objective discussions and incubates and cross-fertilizes ideas that help to strengthen Ghana's insolvency and restructuring industry. Importantly, we hope that this journal will shape the policy, legislative, and jurisprudential underpinnings of our market-based economy as a country. The maiden edition of the journal features 11 articles authored by eminent academics, practitioners, jurists, and others from Ghana, Canada, Nigeria, and South Africa. These articles were authored either by individuals or firms, and they cover a wide range of insolvency-related topics. Please permit me to highlight a few of the articles presented in the maiden journal as well as the authors. So the first article is one by our own president of Garia, Felix Addo, entitled Restoring the Economy, the Role of the New Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act. And this is really, if you will, like a groundbreaking piece that helps to put the CIRJ in perspective and helps to break it down for very easy digestion. And then this is followed by an article by Ms. Equia Isuman Okran entitled The Corporate Rescue Regime in Ghana, a Temporary Protection or a Panacea for Business Development. And then comes the article of our own chair, Professor Anuso, not this chair, Justice S.K. Datiban's inaugural annual public lecture entitled Evolution of the Regulation of Commerce in Ghana, Fashioning a Regulatory Regime for Distressed Companies. And then on and on and on. There's another one by Prosper Melome from the law firm Bridgewater, I believe, and it is entitled Debt Restructuring Options for Failing Companies. And then there's one by a South African author entitled Business Rescue Growing Pains. And then yours truly, I managed to get in an article at the last minute, I might add. I see some people making faces at me. It's entitled The Banking Sector and the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act of 2020. And so on and so forth. So 11 articles, very well written articles, very high quality articles, easy to digest, and edited by a team of distinguished individuals drawn from Garia's Governing Council and membership, and who have worked very hard on this on a pro bono basis, I might add. Let me repeat that it's not a law journal, so as you read it, please cut us some slack, as the Americans will say. Don't compare it to the blue book referencing styles and so on and so forth. These articles are meant to go out there and be a great resource for the CEO of a bank, the partner of the accounting firm or the law firm, the insolvency practitioner, the regulator, the justice of the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal that is trying to understand the space to make a ruling on something, a student of business, accounting, finance, law, economics, management, a professor or researcher in Ghana and beyond. I encourage everyone to read these articles as intently as you can, and more importantly, to provide feedback to the editorial board. And please, please contribute articles to future editions. as we work on making this a world-class, robust journal. And let me add that we would also welcome some more volunteers for the editorial board. And so if you're minded that way, please let Garia know. The plan is to publish this journal twice annually. It takes a lot to get articles and to edit and all of that. And so we're currently going to focus on twice a year. And so we'll be making a call for articles for the next edition very quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, in my capacity as editor-in-chief, a position I couldn't run out of, even though it's been very difficult to keep up with the obligations, I'm very proud to have helped to bring this journal to life. I feel like the midwife that has helped to birth this, and I salute my co-laborers in this effort for their relentless dedication and efforts, and the fact that they never gave up on me, on my editorial role, as well as on my promise to contribute an article. To conclude, I am honored and I am very proud not only to outdoor the maiden edition of Ghana's Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Journal, but also to declare it hereby launched. Long live Ghana's Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Journal. Long live Garia. Long live Ghana and the prosperity and well-being of all her people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. Madam Deputy Governor, respectfully, I ask that you please take your place in the middle as I humbly invite to join you, our chairperson, together with our president, together with our keynote speaker, the representative of the Chief Justice, and our Deputy Attorney General. A round of applause as they come up. Sikadan Cultural Troupe. And so the Honorable Second Deputy Governor keeps telling us that this is not a legal. Well, we have the legal consultant and a lecturer at the University of Ghana who would also flesh out what this whole journal is about, give us a synopsis of a selected article. Would you please make welcome Mr. Courage Asa Bagna.
I think I would say that all protocol has already been observed. I don't know if that deviates from Prof's sense of inquiry, though I totally agree with him. So my paper, as part of one of the controversy, a practical analysis of Ghana and Canada. And I would like to say that it's not to critique or weaknesses of us in Ghana or in Canada. But the paper mainly tries to focus on a cardinal premise, that is to look at how the features and the advantages of the model law has been incorporated into the new corporate and insolvency law in Ghana, and how it can be practiced across regional and international level. So in trying to do, the paper uses a comparative analysis by comparing it to that of Canada and using the 4 pillars as contained in the model. Now, the paper did not use Canada as a standard of measure in terms of how Ghana can leverage from the Canadian regime. But what the paper seeks to do by using Canada by way of a comparative approach is simple. That is to see how the Ghanaian legal regime and that of Canada has been able to adopt the key features of the model law. And what I did, or what the paper has done or did, is to look at the various 2 approaches, which is the territorial approach and the universal approach, by looking at how they play out in terms of their application and usage over the years. So the examination of these 2 legal regimes, like I mentioned, focused on the 4 main pillars of the model law. That is the right of direct access, which I looked at, the equality of creditors, which was also examined, of proceedings, and cooperation. Doing so, I tried to look at the various similarities between the 2 countries and the differences, and how they play out in terms of its adaptation framework. So we all agree that the universalist approach is more of a traditional approach, which in fact has been enhanced into the model approach, which quite maybe debatable. But if you look at it, it still takes that sense of trajectory and all that. So after my careful analysis and examination of the 2 regimes, there's a conclusion that I reached at. I wish time will not permit us to go through all this in my slides. So the conclusion is that the paper concluded by noting that though if you look at the current trend in the long debate has always leaned towards the universal approach, and it has been applied as the fundamental principle when it comes to cross-border insolvency. But if you examine the 2 regimes, you see that still we have significant rudiments of the territorial principles contained in it. And the question has always been, why? Yes, the universal approach, you should remember, is not a convention, neither is it a treaty, which means that countries are given that flexibility in terms of how they want to adopt it to fit their current position by having by making sure that it plays out in context. And for me, it is my considered view that that is what has informed why we still have a significant rudiments of the territorial approach in the Ghanaian law and that of the Canadian law. And it's very simple. The reason being that, yes, the ideal principle is always a good one, but the reality is what will shape the ideal principle. So it is an ideal principle to use the universal approach. But again, countries will always want to keep a balance between what is your interest as a country and what is the ideal approach. And for me, that is my conclusion, that yes, cross-border insolvency as within the Ghanaian position or the Ghanaian regime and that of the Canadian regime has adopted the model law. However, we still have significant rudiments of the territorial approach, mainly because of the fact that practice and that of what is a principle is something that we need to always balance. And this is the short synopsis of my paper. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you help me say a big thank you to our brother Courage for such a courageous presentation. This is where I get to act on behalf of the governor of the Bank of Ghana by mopping every excess liquidity in this place. We don't do these things, write books, publish journals for the sake of making money in Ghana. My experience tells me that we do this for the love of knowledge and to make sure that the literary culture in our country is well entrenched. What I want us to do now is to make a statement, not buy a journal. I want us to make a statement. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the first copy for today, I want any institution or individual so minded, please consider between 20 to 50. Any institution so minded, between 20 to 50,000. Institution, individual, please, 20 to 50,000. The first copy for today. CEO, ladies and gentlemen, he leads by example. A round of applause for the CEO. Please, can we have a copy delivered to the CEO? And for this one, I want the chairman to present it to him personally. Please. A round of applause for the CEO as he makes his way to the front. Wow, highly commendable. Ladies and gentlemen, this is leadership by example, please.
I congratulate George, and I just have a short statement. This is the long and short of the statement.
Prof. Chair, thank you very much. But Prof, if you had become a judge, you would have given some very amazing judgments. So your style of writing, wow, your court would have been very electric. Please, 20,000. 20,000. Oh, I see Deloitte in the house. Greetings. Okay, so I've been told to scale down to 10. 10, please. Please, 10,000 Deloitte. A round of applause. Let me come this way. $10,000. Zenith Bank is in your best interest to do this. 10,000 Ghana cedis. That's all we ask. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our one and only. Please. Let's have. Yes. Thank you very much, Alhaji Yusuf Ibrahim, for 10,000 Ghana cedis. We're ever so grateful. 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. 5,000 Ghana cedis, up to 10. So between 5 and 10,000. Between 5, please, Reverend Ogwami Tete, please, a round of applause. Between 5 and 10,000. Yes. And for this, I believe it would be Kofi Enama. 5,000. Yes. Zenith Bank, ladies and gentlemen. A round of applause for Mr. Gama. Thank you. 5,000. I see you, sir. Thank you very much. 5,000. 5,000. Courage. This is where you show courage. Not only in the writing, but in the, yeah. You're a law lecturer. Say, I want to take the teacher's salary. No. 5,000. 5,000. I see the University of Ghana Business School, Ghana's foremost business school. I believe 5,000 is not too much to ask. Prof, shall we? At least one for the library, the graduate library. Please, a round of applause for University of Ghana Business School, 5,000 Ghana cedis. 5,000. Yes, sir. Mr. Duku, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. Thank you very much. 5,000 Ghana cedis. Okay, between 3 and 5. Between 3 and 5, please. 3 to 5,000, please. Senior. 5,000. Oh, please, a round of applause. 5,000. Okay, 1,500. 1,500. 1,500. Oh, thank you very much, ICAG. We're grateful. 1,500. 1,500. Okay, we're wrapping up. It's important that we hear from our chairperson for today, who would also declare the Garia Week duly launched. A round of applause for our chair, Professor Emeritus Albert Fiajo.
Colleagues and friends, there's no question but that we've had a wonderful launch. I do not believe in summarizing proceedings which we have all witnessed. So instead, they've given me 5 minutes. I'm going to take 2 minutes. I'll tell you about a quiz on why Socrates was killed. And this quiz was before 7-year-olds in a primary school. The girl who won the quiz wrote 3 sentences. Socrates was a genius. He talked too much, and they killed him. So, mindful of that admonition, the lesson is that brevity is the soul of wit. I want to conclude by saying the oxygen behind any successful journal is the volume and quality of the articles that it can generate. So I leave you with the admonition, having regard to the intellectual firepower which I see around, that let this be the engine behind the growth and sustenance of our journal. My grateful thanks to all of you, especially including our duty bearers. And as you can see, the MC thinks that I could be a judge, so I must prove him right. As the judges will say to an innocent person, after hearing the evidence, I say to all of you, after refreshments, you are free to go. Thank you all very much.
For Prof. Emeritus Albert Fiajo, yours has been a job well done. we thank you ever so much for lending us your presence, your wit, your great insight, which has seen to the success of this occasion. How do we end a day like this? Well, I take a note from our chairperson and also quote the great Socrates, and I say, the unexamined life is not worth living. And so as we leave here, let's examine our various organizations, let's examine those of our clients, and let's make sure that we at least help them to remain solvent and properly structured. My name is Jerry Ajololo, and I'm thankful for this opportunity. On behalf of Garia, I say thank you all for coming. Let's rise and pray in the best way we know how. Prof. Chair, if it pleases you, I ask that we all sing the national anthem as a prayer for our country. Shall we? God bless our homeland, Ghana, and make our nation great and strong, bold to defend forever the cause of freedom and of right. Fill our hearts with true humility. Make us cherish fearless honesty, and help us to resist oppressors' rule with all our will and might forevermore. And help us to resist oppressors' rule with all our will and might forevermore. We ask this of you, the great God of nations, in faith and in thanksgiving. Amen.